June 18, 2020, Munich, Germany. Inside the headquarters of Wirecard, the atmosphere is suffocating. This is the darkest day in the history of German finance. The auditors from EY are sitting in a conference room. The CEO, Markus Braun, is waiting for them to sign off on the annual financial report. For years, Wirecard has been the pride of the nation. It was a tech giant that processed payments for everyone from airlines to Aldi supermarkets. It was worth 24 billion euros. It was the German answer to PayPal, a shining example that Europe could produce a global tech titan. But on this Thursday morning, the auditors do not sign the papers. Instead, they deliver a sentence that destroys the company in seconds. There is no evidence that 1.9 billion euros in cash trust accounts actually exists. 1.9 billion euros. That is not a rounding error. That is not a miscalculation. That is enough money to buy a small island. It was supposed to be sitting in 2 banks in the Philippines. But when the auditors called the banks said, "We have no idea who you are. Wirecard has no accounts here." The money was gone. Or rather, the money had never existed. This is the story of Wirecard. It is not just a story about accounting fraud. It is a story that involves Russian spies, Libyan militias, private jets, hacking, and a fugitive executive who is currently one of the most wanted men in the world. This is the financial world's version of a James Bond movie. To understand how a lie this big could survive for so long, we have to look at the 2 men at the top. First, there was Markus Braun, the CEO. He was the intellectual tech visionary. He wore black turtlenecks like Steve Jobs. He spoke in complex, futuristic sentences about the cashless society. He owned 7% of the company and was a paper billionaire. He projected an image of absolute confidence. Then, there was Jan Marsalek, the COO. If Braun was the face, Marsalek was the shadow. Marsalek was charming, dangerous, and lived a life that no corporate executive should live. He didn't just manage operations, he managed secrets. He bragged about having the formula for Novichok, the deadly Russian nerve agent. He attempted to recruit a private militia in Libya. He hosted lavish parties in Munich where bills ran into the tens of thousands of euros. While Braun was selling the dream to investors, Marsalek was building the labyrinth of lies that kept the company alive. The brilliance of the Wirecard fraud was its complexity. Wirecard claimed that a huge portion of its profit came from Asia, specifically from third-party acquirers, or TPAs. Here is how the lie worked. Wirecard claimed that in countries where they didn't have a license to operate, they used these partner companies, TPAs, to process payments for them. Wirecard said, "We are doing great business in Asia, and these partners are holding the cash for us." It was a black box. Nobody could see inside these partner companies. When investors asked to see the transaction data, Wirecard said, "We can't show you, it's a trade secret." For years, skeptics tried to expose them. The most persistent was Dan McCrum, a journalist for the Financial Times. McCrum spent years digging into Wirecard. He found that these so-called partners in Asia were often just empty offices. One major partner in the Philippines was a bus company. Another was a small house, where a retired seaman lived with his family. But every time McCrum or short sellers tried to publish the truth, Wirecard attacked. They didn't just deny the claims, they went to war. They hired private investigators to follow journalists. They launched hacking attacks against their critics. And they had the German state on their side. The German financial regulator BaFin was so blinded by national pride that they didn't investigate Wirecard. Instead, they investigated the journalists. They actually filed criminal complaints against Dan McCrum for market manipulation. They banned investors from betting against Wirecard stock. The German government effectively acted as the bodyguard for a criminal organization. This protection gave Markus Braun and Jan Marsalek a feeling of invincibility. They believed they could fake it forever. But mathematics is stubborn. You can fake profit on a spreadsheet, but you cannot fake cash in the bank. Eventually, you have to pay the bills. To cover the holes, Wirecard had to invent bigger and bigger lies. They claimed the billions were sitting in trust accounts in Singapore. When regulators checked Singapore, they moved the money to the Philippines. It all came crashing down in that summer of 2020. The auditors at EY, under massive pressure from the Financial Times reports, finally decided to do something they should have done years ago. They didn't just take Wirecard's word for it. They actually called the banks in the Philippines directly The banks confirmed the documents were forgeries, clumsy forgeries. The signatures were fake. The bank employees named on the documents didn't exist. When the news broke, Wirecard stock fell 99% in 7 days. Billions of euros of investor money evaporated instantly. Pension funds, retail investors, and banks lost everything. Markus Braun was arrested. He is currently sitting in a jail cell in Germany, claiming he is innocent, and that he was also a victim of a fraud he didn't know about. But the most incredible part of the story is Jan Marsalek. On the day Braun was arrested, Marsalek was fired. He calmly walked out of the Wirecard offices. He told colleagues he was going to the Philippines to find the missing money and prove everyone wrong. He checked immigration records to show he had entered the Philippines, but that was another lie. He had bribed immigration officers to falsify the entry logs. He never went to Asia. Instead, Jan Marsalek boarded a private jet to Belarus. From there, intelligence agencies believe he was transported to Russia. It turned out Marsalek had been cultivating ties with the GRU, the Russian military intelligence agency, for years. Today, Jan Marsalek is one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Interpol has a red notice out for him. Reports suggest he is living comfortably in Moscow, likely under the protection of the Russian state, perhaps even working with them. He took with him the secrets of a company that processed payments for sensitive Western clients, potentially compromising intelligence operations across Europe. The Wirecard scandal is a brutal lesson in, quote, confirmation bias. Everyone wanted Wirecard to be real. The investors wanted the returns. The auditors wanted the fees. The German government wanted a tech champion. They wanted it so badly that they ignored the red flags waving right in their faces. They ignored the whistleblower who said the numbers didn't add up. They ignored the journalist who said the offices were empty. They ignored the fact that the CEO was a paper billionaire and the COO was a wannabe spy. In the end, Wirecard wasn't a bank. It wasn't a tech company. It was a stage play, a carefully choreographed performance designed to extract billions from the pockets of the blind. The 1.9 billion euros was never lost. You cannot lose something that never existed. What was lost was the reputation of an entire country's financial system, and the savings of thousands of people who believed the lie. Wirecard is gone, Markus Braun is in prison, but somewhere in the shadow of the Kremlin, Jan Marsalek is likely smiling, the only man who successfully cashed out of the greatest illusion in European history.